Today on the podcast, we're talking sculpture, Antiques Roadshow, and horses see ghosts. This is the Kansas City Podcast. Welcome to the Kansas City Podcast. I'm your host, Cole Lindberg. Many of you know me from my Memorial Day barbecue, and if not, it's nice to meet you. You know, each week here on the Kansas City Podcast, we are joined by one-of-a-kind KC native for a conversation on life in the city of fountains. And I took a little bit of a road trip today. I've traveled south of the city. I am hanging out today with a gentleman that he has a very long resume, and we're going to talk about many different things today. He's a writer. He is a sculptor. His most recent work is a book of poetry called Horses See Ghosts, which I love that title, by the way. It's a very...
And they do. They do? Yeah, I've watched them do it.
But how so? You mean like
well, they stand transfixed in the pasture and maybe two of them or three of them with their ears up watching something, and I can't see what they're watching, so
It's got to be a ghost.
I go in their line of sight, and there's nothing there, and I'll yell at them and break the spell, and they'll take off. But... They're watching something, and it's not anything I can see. So,
well, I would like to welcome to the show today, here for our Memorial Day episode, Guinotte Wise. Guinotte, welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. Thank you for having me. You've welcomed me here into your beautiful home, and we're hanging out together, and we're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. I have never met anyone named Guinotte before. Where's that name come from?
Well,
for a second, when you first sent me the email, I was like, wait, that's not, how do I even pronounce this?
I tell you what, that was given to me because it's an old family last name, and there was a Judge Guinotte in Kansas City who was a well thought of Democrat judge, and he was reelected for 37 years. He was so well thought of, but and his name was Jules Guinotte, and he was one of the few. I don't want to get into politics, but that's such an...
Wait, so that's where the name come from, and it stuck.
That's such a flashpoint for a lot of people. But and we've got Republicans and Democrats on both sides, so anyway, yeah. I've got that going for me. But
yes.
His name... there was a book put out many years ago about the people who's and I do air quotes here, settled Kansas City.
Right.
But, and he was one of them, and he lived in the old Guinotte Manor down on Troost.
Right,
right.
right.
And at any rate, I ended up with his name as a first name. And I was baptized in the Catholic Church, so I had to have a saint's name too. And they gave me Edward, but they never told me about it. I never knew that there was an Edward in there, or
okay.
I'd be Ed Wise.
You would have gone with Ed.
Oh, for sure. Guinotte, try growing up with that.
That's a good point.
We moved from New York, Manhattan Island, to St. Joseph, Louisiana. And I was the strangest kid there because I wore corduroys, and I called funny books comic books, and I had a name like Guinotte, so I was always getting beat up and chased, and I never could understand it. But
and so it was all because of the name.
Oh, Guinotte. What's your name? Guinotte Wise. Yeah.
No, really, what's your name? Guinotte.
It worked like that, yeah. And it used to make people angry. So little kids,
Yeah.
And I was always a focal point in grade school. We moved a lot, but especially a little later, when my stepfather worked in the oil business, and we moved to Tulsa.
Yeah.
And we stopped moving for a while, and that was a nice place. But anyway, Guinotte,
Guinotte, that's where it's at.
And they called me Butch in high school for, well, Butch kind of caught on at an early age, and then went on through high school, and people still call me that who haven't seen me for years, see me on the street. But anyway, Butch kind of saved me, so, and that put me into the zeitgeist of decent names, you know.
Well, for the sake of this interview, I'm going to call you Guinotte, because I think Guinotte is a cool name. Just because I've never heard it before as a first name.
I like it now. I've gotten used to it. Yes, please do call me Guinotte.
Guinotte, you is it safe to say you are a man of many hats? You have many different things that you do and are involved in. You have several books. You have sculpt. I mean, it seems like you've got a lot of stuff going on that you're still doing and working on.
Well, you know, when I was watching your adventures at Worlds of Fun,
my good old Worlds of Fun adventures.
I got to thinking that I could have really enjoyed that job, although I wouldn't have given it the zest that you did. But when I was a little kid, I used to make amusement parks out of wire and balsa wood,
little models,
little models.
Yeah.
And I had things that would spill water into another thing, like a little water park.
Okay.
And they were made out of wooden bowls. You know, those years ago. I don't want to tell you how many years, but when I was a kid, my father shaved with shaving cream that came in a wooden bowl container.
Right.
And when he was done with it, he would throw them out, and I would search the trash and get all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd make a park that was about as big as this desk, with animals and things to see, and little fences that had animals in them, and little games, because I was an addict of the penny arcade down on 12th Street. Oh my God, what fun that was. And it was just another world.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started making these things back then that nobody understood, and except me. I understood them perfectly, but or I'd find a way to take a shoebox and a light bulb and some other things and put them all together, and by the time I was done, it looked like something maybe Warhol would approve of, you know, and when he was alive, but nobody else understood it but me, and I still make things like that.
Well, see, when I was little, that's because the amusement parks was crazy for me too. So I would draw out, because I always wanted to be like a Disney Imagineer. That's what I wanted.
Oh,
When I was a little kid, that was what I wanted. I wanted to work for Walt Disney and build rides at Disney World. So I would draw out my roller coaster ideas and my ride ideas, and then I had Legos and other Lincoln Logs and Connects, and I would build weird little kind of Ferris wheel rides and stuff, but it would have like a weird swinging contraption component to, where it's it's going around and then whoa, that's not gonna fly. The physics on that don't work out unless you're gonna kill someone if it's going that high.
Something that would be illegal now.
Exactly. Yes.
But it was a lot of fun then. Yeah.
You mentioned, building things and stuff, because I've seen some pictures of some of your sculpture work and everything like that. Were you always a tinkerer, and then you just kind of grew into it? And how long would you say you've technically been like a sculptor doing shows? Because I know you've done shows too.
Well, I didn't start shows until after much later in life, about 10 or 15 years ago. I started doing some. I started showing. I had my first show in East downtown Kansas City. I can't remember the name of the place, but it was a 2-man show, and the lady that showed with me had bronze rabbits with clothes on them, and it was really amazing stuff. but she had little checked shirts and things that they wore, and I had these big horses that I had a horse called Fat Boy Loves to Roll, and it was as big as this whole area, and it was on his back.
Oh, we're sitting in an area. This is what, like
10 by 5.
Yeah.
And he had a. I remember he had a neck made out of a Chevrolet speedometer from the 50s, and he had all these odd things going on, but you could tell that he was a horse on his back.
Yeah.
And somebody in Florida bought that and put it in front of a restaurant. And
really?
Yeah, and they came through again after I had started having one-man shows, and they pick up a piece of sculpture every couple of years and take it down to Florida, to Orlando, to this restaurant. But it just progressed from there, and people liked the horses, but I got tired of doing horses, so I started doing other things that they didn't like as much. But I did crows, and they loved crows. But
it sounds like a lot of animals, horses, crows.
Yeah, there was and animals that you couldn't tell what they were, like maybe anteaters or something with a long nose and a long tail. But then I'd place these things on kids' wagons, and I'd weld them to the wagons, and I'd put maybe a crow on their back or something, and they got more and more fanciful as I went along. And then I decided to get serious, and I did some. my downfall. I did some brutalist pieces from the 60s and 70s, and everybody just kind of looked at it. They weren't what they expected from me.
Yeah.
And I didn't lose any following, but they were kind of like. Well, I think the worst thing you could say about a sculpture is, well, that's very interesting, you know.
People have told me that many times with the different things I've done. That's very interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of that when they look at these brutalist pieces.
Yeah.
Very interesting. and that's
Great. Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah. And some would say something, well, I kind of miss the whimsy, you know. The whimsical touch. And so I guess a lot of my stuff would be maybe classified as folk art. I like that because that's the most genuine art that I've ever seen is when I lived down south in Kentucky and Louisiana, I used to see these things that would just be there for decorative purposes. You'd see something next to a tree that was carved out of a stump, you know, and it would be a figure of some kind, and I loved them as a child, and I think it was just the most genuine stuff I've ever seen, but I can't go back and kind of copy that.
Right.
But I do some things that turn out that way. I get sort of lost in a kind of a fugue state when I'm doing a piece that I really enjoy.
Oh, you get in the zone. You're working, and you can't
just
go
time
away.
Just goes away.
Yeah.
And by the time I'm done, I think, well, that's one of those pieces that people will say, very interesting, but I like it, and it's going to be part of that show. But and those have sold.
So for our listeners, what's we're talking about these sculptures and different things, but I mean, I've seen pictures of it, and we're going to have pictures posted on our website to your website so people can take a closer look.
Good.
But what's your media of choice? I mean, are you like because it's hard for me to because I've seen the photos and I see all these other different like intricate pieces, like stuff maybe you'd find at like the thrift shop or the antique store, and it's all put together and created into something more.
Yeah.
So am I on the right track of describing it?
Yeah, very much. I think once I put something together and it's where I want it to be. It would be very hard for somebody to deconstruct it, but they would say, I recognize this over here, and I like this here, and I never thought that...
Like I recognize a piece of a car here.
And I never thought that this would go with this, but it does. Yeah. And that's what I like to hear. I love to hear people that don't know that I'm listening discuss my sculpture.
Yeah.
And when I had these brutalist pieces, I also had a horse on a kid's wagon, and the horse was looking around like he was nervous, and his ears were back. He didn't like being on the wagon, and a man came over and said, "Okay, now this is a horse." You know, he said,
"Very good. Yes,
I get this." You know, he said talking to his wife, and she said, "Yeah, yeah, you can tell." And he said, "Now where's some other stuff like that?" And I had like 3 pieces that you could recognize what they were, and he liked those 3, and then they went on to another gallery. But anyway, it's kind of odd the reactions you get, and
well, art is subjective, you know. Like so many people are just, you know, you look at something. I mean, I've been to plenty of galleries and stuff where I've seen things that I do not get, but I know there's someone else that's in there like, oh my goodness, I just had an epiphany.
Well, there's so many things I don't get when I go to galleries. I don't say a word because people would think I was not very sophisticated or something. But yeah, I get Sculpture magazine. And I like to see what other people are doing, and sometimes I see these wires and Christmas lights and things that they go up one side of a wall and into another room, you know, and I think, well, how is that sculpture? And I probably shouldn't hold forth on this because the person who did it might be listening, but
I doubt it.
Anyway, I just I do what I do, and I use a lot of discarded things, and
you go dumpster diving? You search around?
Well, I used to do a lot of that. Did you see my junkyard on the way out?
A little bit. I saw. Yeah. We didn't get to do the full tour, but I saw a large pile of what I would consider junk. Yes,
we've got a junkyard.
Okay.
And my wife is very, very nice about that. She has never said, well, let's put a privacy fence around it or anything like that.
You're hurting the value of our property.
She understands. And I'll go out there and I'll look around and suddenly something will catch my eye and it'll be like, well, I found an old grocery cart out there.
Okay.
And I have some wheels, some big wheels, look like they belong on a dragster, and I'm gonna put those wheels on that grocery cart, and I've got enough engine parts that I'm gonna build an engine, and nothing will work, but the thing will have wheels under it, and it'll move, so you can move it from room to room if you want.
It's like a souped up hot rod shopping cart.
Yeah, and it's gonna have like ape hangers on the back of it, and maybe a place to sit, and but that's my next project, and I get kind of excited about it when I see this. And I did I did a chopper that has such long front forks that it would never ever work. But it's about from this wall to mid wall there.
Okay. So about
it's a regular.
6-8 feet,
it's got a regular tank on it and a seat, a chrome seat, and it's got at any rate a fellow bought it for his front yard. He wanted it for his front yard, and I thought, well, fine, it'll rust, but he knows that, and he's ready for that.
Yeah.
And I am too, because I like things to rust
The natural patina.
Naturally, yeah.
That's patina, right?
Yeah.
I learned that from plenty of like junkyard shows that to get the proper value, it's got to have the natural patina on it.
It is a patina, and it's a genuine one, yeah. And I like rust.
Yeah.
I've been in some rust shows where you have to have rusty pieces.
Rust never sleeps.
Rust never sleeps.
What's the project that, is there any of them in your mind that you've worked on that stick out in your mind as like, I'm really proud of that one, or maybe it's too much of an undertaking, like any that stick out in your mind of like, man, what was I doing here?
I've made some big things that
I saw that. I saw some photos of what looked like some really large pieces. Like you'd have to get a special vehicle to take it somewhere.
It has to be lifted with a crane, and I'm kind of backing away from pieces like that because I'm here alone, and I can't move a piece like that to work on it.
You don't have a crane around past the junkyard or something?
No, but I've got friends with cranes and tow trucks and all kinds of things. They'll move it for me.
Can you come lift this in the air for me while I weld this car part on this exhaust onto the back?
But you have to be very careful because I have to make sure those welds are going to hold.
Oh yeah,
and are very, very strong welds because you'd hate for a piece to come apart and fall on somebody or something.
Yeah.
So I'm careful with those big pieces, but I'm not sure I really want the responsibility of doing something monumental unless I take it to a steel company and have them fabricate it.
Oh, gotcha.
And I had a piece that I did a model about 2 feet tall. It was supposed to be 20 feet tall, and it was
it's a big difference there.
Oh yeah, and by the time it got as big as I wanted it, these were long girders, and they were bent over just a little bit at the top, and there were like 7 or 8 of them, and they had a base, and it was to look like prairie grass, in a breeze, and it was to be set in payola, and the town council. I got some of their emails by mistake, and
did they hit the reply all?
and well, this is just junk. Why do we want to have this as the gateway to a city or a town that's trying to look its best? And I saw where that was going, but the people who wanted me to do it and backed me on it finally convinced them that yes, this was a piece of sculpture that would last for a long time and people would revere it.
Yeah,
but they couldn't come up with the money. It was I'd have donated it to them, but the thing itself would cost about $15,000 or $20,000 to fabricate, and couldn't come up with the money. They come up with about $5,000 or $6,000, but they couldn't do the whole thing, and I couldn't help them out in that regard. But that was probably the biggest thing I've tackled, and it would have had to be well done, and I was going to have Doherty Steel put the thing together because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, that came to naught. But that was one I liked, one I would like to be able to see driving past it.
Prairie grass.
Yeah, prairie grass.
Very nice. Very nice.
Nice.
Now, I know, aside from that, let's talk about your writing a little bit, because you just recently put out a poetry book.
Yeah.
We talked about the horses seeing ghosts already.
Yeah.
But give me a little bit of background on the you said sculpture, 10, 15 years. So what about the writing side of things?
Well, as you used to do is wanting to be an Imagineer
Yes.
at Disney.
Yes.
You took a certain path,
Right.
and when I was a kid, someone gave me a printing press, a little printing press that had rubber type.
Oh, wow.
And you'd set the type, and you'd run off copies of this thing, and all my articles were very short because
You only had so many letters?
well, I had plenty of letters, but you learn to economize in your words because and I used to do things that journalism. I put out a little newspaper that had awful things about the neighbors that big communist spies and things like that. And
You were that kid.
I was that kid, and I would be a journalist today. But so I took another path. But I was probably the first with the fake news, and I did.
Here comes Guinotte's paper.
I did these libelous articles, and
Let's see what the Johnsons are up to down the street.
There were people who in the neighborhood of my grandmother's house over on Troost that I used to watch very carefully, and they'd disappear for long periods of time, and then they'd come out, and then they'd go back in, and I'd think about what they were doing, and I'd make things up, and then
That's
they'd
incredible.
be in the paper. But so I wrote, and I also drew a lot, and I ended up at the Art Institute after University of Arkansas and some other normal schools,
Yeah.
and got caught up in the Dada movement, which was anti-art,
Right.
and it was such fun. It was such fun to make fun of art, and and I did a lot of that. And I think people think I'm still doing it, but I'm not. Just I want people to know that I'm not doing that anymore. But I wrote things. I took notes, and I would keep a little journal about what people were doing and what was going on around my neighborhood. And then I went into advertising as an artist, an art director, but I liked the copy side of it.
Right.
So I would do some of that, and I would be allowed to in some agencies, and then I became a copywriter rather than an art director, and I wrote so much, and I wrote quickly. I read a lot.
Yeah.
And I read voraciously. I just and it all seemed to come together in writing, and I loved to write, and I did. I remember years before I started writing these latest books, I would do like 50 pages of a novel, and I'd send it to one outfit like Scribner and Sons, and I actually got an answer from them. They said, "We like what you're doing here. Keep us apprised of what you're doing." And I didn't realize at the time how unusual that was to get an answer, any answer from an editor. And I just some writers, and I guess I was one, have a fear of actually appearing on the page.
Okay.
And what I did with that 50 pages after I got this answer from Scribner and Sons was never touch it again, ever. I never, and I can't even begin to tell you what it was about. It was about a person that I'm looking out the window, there's an owl flying back and forth. and you would have seen, if you'd have been here a week earlier, you would have seen the pups outside with fishing line all across their pen, because I thought the owl might come and take them away, because this is a big owl, and it has flown down in there in their pen as a barred owl, and it looked kind of crazy with this fishing line and string all over everything, but it was to keep that owl from landing in their pen.
Yeah.
But it didn't have the desired effect, because it never would have landed in their pen. So I cut it all off. But it's been flying back and forth here for some.
I haven't looked out the window yet. I'll have to, if you see it come by, point it out to me again.
I will. It's got a nest out in the front yard overlooking the dog pen, but it hasn't. It used to land in the driveway, and I guess gravel has an attraction for birds, but and it would look at me with that strange head that turns like a ventriloquist.
Right. You're just expecting it to start talking, and he's like, "Hello."
Yeah, like Edgar Bergen, but anyway, I seem to have lost track. But
that's okay. I do not want the pups to get attacked by an owl. So if we need to
I don't think they will be. They've grown quite a bit.
They'll take the owl down. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like 20 pounds now. They were like 8 pounds when I got them.
Yeah.
And I think an owl might have been interested in them, but
not anymore.
Not anymore. I knock on wood. But anyway, so.
I don't know. I lost our train of thought too. You were copywriting and writing stuff, and
yeah, I was writing, and then I went into just copywriting. I was out in Los Angeles for several years, and I did Toyota copy and a broadcast and print, and that was such a wonderful job out there, because they I'd go in very early, like 5:30 in the morning, and I'd leave at 3, and I'd get all my work done before noon, and then I'd go across to the Del Amo Mall, where I had a couple of freelance accounts, and I would talk to them, a jeweler and a Benetton, and do their stuff, and then I'd leave at 3 and go home. And I was talk about solitary. When I was out there, I lived in Rancho Palos Verdes, and I had a one side of the townhouse had a Venetian blinds, and somebody would come out to visit me from Kansas City, and they'd say, "What's out this window?" And they'd open the Venetian blinds, and it was the ocean. And they'd say, "Why do you keep this closed like this? It's so dark." And I said, "Well, I've gone as far west as I can, and it kind of intimidates me, because there's nowhere I can go unless it's Australia or somewhere." and they never quite understood it, nor did I. But anyway, I did quite a bit of the copy for those Toyota things, and enjoyed it. And then I got homesick.
Yeah. And
I wanted to come home, and the main creative director was a guy from Brooklyn. He big beefy guy. He wore a bow tie, and he was kind of outspoken and kind of tough. And I said, well, I kind of gave my notice, and he said, well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, okay, but I gave my notice, and then he said, well, let's have lunch, and we did. And he said, now, what is this about you leaving? Why would you leave? And I said, well, I'm getting kind of homesick, and I kind of want. I think I want to hear coyotes again at night.
Yeah.
And he said, "Coyotes? We got coyotes. We've got coyotes over in Brentwood. Over on the golf course, and we can fix you up over there." And I said, "No, that's not really the reason I'm leaving." But that went on for several weeks, and it was very gratifying, because when somebody wants you to stay, that means you're doing a good job. And so I left there with a good feeling. But then I started writing on the side to satisfy an urge, and I was writing short stories and things like that, and getting them published in literary reviews. And the first book of short stories I wrote won an award in publication.
Yeah.
So I didn't give you a copy of that, because I don't think I have any copies left of that one. But
That's okay.
Anyway, so that kind of propelled me on, and I kept writing, getting published.
Yeah. Were you born in Kansas City?
Yeah, born in Kansas City at St. Luke's.
Really?
Yeah.
At St. Luke's.
Yeah.
And then basically moved all over, right?
Yeah. I.
What was it you told? I remember in your first email to me, you said that, was it your stepdad?
My stepfather, during World War II, we didn't see a lot of each other. He worked on the Manhattan Project.
That's right. Okay, that's what. Yeah, he worked on the Manhattan Project.
He was one of these genius types, and he went to college when he was 15, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he worked on some facet of the atomic bomb. He later told me it was a switch, just a switch.
Yeah.
And
that seems like a very important part.
a very important part, because
Yes.
it had to work.
Yes. Yeah.
But
in the simplest of terms, he had to flick the switch, and it had to work.
And it had to work. And it wasn't just a switch like on that light there.
I would hope not.
It was probably something very complicated, like a super collider switch or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when he did that, when he worked on that, he couldn't tell us what he was doing. And the funny thing is, we lived in Manhattan when he started on this, and it's called the Manhattan Project, but it started at the University of Chicago. But we lived in Manhattan because there was a facet of it there that he worked on. And he was Canadian. And they kind of coerced him to work on this, or no citizenship. Oh. And as I understood it, but he did work on it, and we moved from. He dropped me and my sister off in Louisiana with his parents, who his father was an Episcopal minister, and so I did a lot of church back then. I remember scratchy woolens and a white shirt and having to sit in church and listen to. But my step grandfather was born in London, and he had a funny accent.
Yeah.
And it was a British accent, of course. And
wait,
so,
that's what it is in London? No, I'm just kidding.
So that added to his cachet, but not mine. So I was Guinotte, the kid who lived with this Episcopal minister, and
with a British accent.
A British accent, which his congregation loved. But if I picked up any of his sayings, like we'd go to the hardware store, and he'd put something down and say, "No, that's too dear. I can't afford it." And if I picked that up, that's another reason to get beat up. So I I strongly avoided any of his sayings and things, and but he was a wonderful guy. He was just a neat man. I was a little scared of my grandmother, my step grandmother, because she would chop the head off a live chicken
Chase you around
every Sunday. No, she just did that for Sunday dinner, and
no, I meant the chicken would chase you around.
The chicken would run all over, and which fascinated me. But
You're not the only one. That's why I brought it up. I find it very fascinating.
I also never tried to get on her wrong side. But, But and we lived in Kentucky, where he had a congregation, and the story was that he had a congregation in some tobacco town, like wherever cigarettes were made. It was a big city.
Right.
And after church, a gentleman came up to him and said, and offered him a lucky strike. And he said, "Not a coffin, a carload." That was their slogan back then.
Yeah.
And my step-grandfather said in a loud voice, "No, but another nail in your coffin," and so, which you didn't say in a tobacco town. You didn't say in a cigarette town.
Right.
And he was demoted and sent to the Slobovia of Episcopal churches, which was St. Joseph, Louisiana, a little town. And then we moved to Winchester, Kentucky. I think that was a step up. I'm not sure. But Winchester, Kentucky, I spent a lot of time there. Then in 45, when the war was over, I was back with my stepfather and my mother. And we moved to Tulsa because he was an engineer, an electrical engineer, and he worked in the oil industry.
Yeah.
We lived in Tulsa for several years. But so that's the reason for that. But I got some Cajun expressions down in St. Joseph that got my mouth washed out from my step-grandmother. I remember one time something I picked up was that I kind of liked was, "Come here a minute ago, son of a bitch. Me want orange soda," or something like that. And so I went around parroting that all the time, and I said it in front of my grandmother. "Come here a minute ago, son of a bitch."
And then she chased after you with the knife, like, "I'm going to cut your head off."
No, she chased after me with a bar of lava soap. And I got my mouth washed out, and I'd only heard about that up to that time, but I watched what I said. I had to watch what I said in town.
Yeah.
I didn't want to sound like my step-grandfather, or I dearly loved him, I didn't want to. I couldn't say any of these Cajun things at home.
Right.
And so I was walking a tightrope for quite some time.
You had to be careful.
Yeah.
Cole here. Hope you're having a happy Memorial Day weekend. Maybe you're out jamming with some friends, having a barbecue, drinking some delicious beverages. Maybe you're at home, relaxing, taking a nap. Maybe you're listening to this podcast. Maybe you are having a podcast listening party because this is the highlight of your week. And if it is, I thank you for that. I hope you're enjoying today's interview. I hope you're doing great. I hope you're doing well. Please give us a review on iTunes. Tell your friends, tell your enemies all about the show. Thank you for listening. And, here we go. Back to the show with some more Guinotte Wise. How, since this is the Kansas City podcast, let's talk. You were born in Kansas City. You moved all around. You've been back around. You wanted to come back to hear the coyotes again and everything.
Yep.
What do you? what's the craziest change that you've seen in Kansas City, or the thing that surprised you the most from all these years?
I can't say that anything really changed. Everything progressed. Everything got impressive to me. I like when they were building this music hall downtown.
Yeah.
That gorgeous center.
Mm-hmm.
It used to make me smile to drive by it on the way to work, to see the shape of that thing.
Yeah.
And to know that Kansas City accepted it. Kansas City embraced it, wanted it. And I was very proud of the city. And those things those pylons downtown, those sculptures.
Yes.
I've loved them since day one. They look to me like sort of Art Deco things. And
the Bartle Hall. I'm talking about Bartle Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people would call them hair
Space station
curlers and
a hair curler.
curlers and things like that.
I always called one the hair curler and the two the nose trimmer. Because they're just and then you got like a weird ball.
Yeah, but I loved those things, and I thought the architect or the sculptor or whoever made those things, and I understand it was a woman, that had the knowledge of structure in order to anchor those things and make them stay where they are. And of course, there are a lot of cables that hold those things up and keep them from any sway properties. But those things make me very proud to be a Kansas City, and things like Kansas City Public Television, which I'm addicted to. I love it.
I am too. I watch, if Antiques Roadshow is on.
Antiques Roadshow.
I'm watching Antiques Roadshow. That's one of my favorite shows right now. I don't know why. I just love it.
I do too. And Ruckus and Week in Review. Week in Review with Nick Haynes and Ruckus with Shannon and the Ruckettes, and all their different views. And I learn things every time I watch them. I'll learn something about the city, and that it's not a forced learning. It's not here I go, this class 101 in Kansas City, but. It's interesting to me what these views are and what they say, but and Kansas City is an unusual center of energy. There's an energy here, and I think that maybe Austin, Texas has that energy. And Tulsa had an energy that has slacked off over the years, but back when it was a boom town, it had that wonderful energy because the city fathers and the people who ran the city made things that buildings of. I didn't realize it, but when I grew up there, I grew up appreciating Art Deco.
Yeah.
And Tulsa is a hotbed of Art Deco. I never realized that until I moved away.
Yeah.
But and another reason that I'm attracted to Antiques Roadshow is a lot of Art Deco on Antiques Roadshow. But
when you're watching Antiques Roadshow, does it ever make you? I always get when I'm watching it, I always start to get. I'm always so impressed by the amount of knowledge that some of these experts know on some of this stuff. Yeah. And then as they're going through and they're talking about the history and things like that, I always get kind of like, man, I would have had no idea, but I feel like what have I been doing? Why have I not like looked in the corner of the closet and like tried to learn about, the stuff that I have or anything?
Well,
like if you go out to your junkyard right now, who knows? There could be something,
and there will be something that catches my eye, and I use it, but that's their area of expertise.
Yeah.
And
I wish I had that expertise. That's what you're saying. I wish I had it.
Yeah.
I wish I could look at somebody like, that right there, that's from the Ming Dynasty.
And if we turn this drawer over, you'll see that the dovetail is something or other.
I found a inscription under the microscope, and I do think it was etched. I think it's original, and it's from 1865.
I think it's probably worth $250,000.
Sold. It's insane.
Yeah, I love it when they discover something like that. I always feel the dismay of the person who brought the piece when they discover it's a fake. I always feel bad for them and think, oh man, take this to Antiques Roadshow and it's like you share in the fakery or something.
Right.
But
why'd you pick me out to expose me? What's going on? I only want to be on this show if you're going to give me good news.
I'll never show my face again.
I'm going to take this doll and burn it. This isn't fair. Any other Kansas City thoughts?
Just I'm sure I'll come up with half a dozen when you leave.
Oh, that's all right.
But just the energy of the place. There's a creative energy, and I used to know a guy that played clarinet with Clyde McCoy, and he said that there was an energy that an affinity for an energy of a city to various people, like his was in Cleveland, Ohio, of all places, but mine, I feel, is Tulsa and Kansas City.
Yeah.
And Kansas City, and when I was out in Los Angeles was so good to me. That place was marvelous. I can't.
City of Angels.
I loved it.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to get back to Kansas City, and it was Kansas City I wanted to get back to. It was not any place else. It was like I didn't want to just move from L.A. and go somewhere. I definitely very much wanted to come back to Kansas City. And I think my dad used to say, my real dad said, Kansas City is a place where people who leave it always seem to come back.
Yeah.
And I can certainly understand why. Except Calvin Trillin and people like that haven't come back, but maybe they will.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of a place. The energy. I have to say, it's the creative energy.
The energy. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Totally agree. I see it more and more now, because I was born in Smithville, so way up north, and then I never made it into like downtown. I was always a Northlander, and then as I've gotten older, my wife and I find ourselves going downtown all the time to go do stuff, and it's just this kind of. It's just very strange. How did I not realize all the fun stuff that was happening in my city? You know what I mean? And part of this podcast has really opened up all that more to me itself, because I was always used to being up north. I was either working at Worlds of Fun, or I was going to Gladstone to visit my grandma, or I was hanging out, in Smithville. And it was very rare that I would get south of the river. And now, anytime, I want to try every single restaurant that's downtown. I want to go to the Crossroads all the time. I want to, go play games at Up Down, or go ride the streetcar, go see things, and it's different. Maybe it just comes with age, or just being the able to go out and do things. But it's different now than I ever remember.
It's changed, but like I say, it's progressed, except in some areas, because I remember as a kid, little kid, my grandmother used to take me downtown Kansas City to Emery Bird Thayer and to some tea room where we'd get a sandwich or something, and places that I loved to go, and we'd take the streetcar. Yeah. And the streetcar went from 39th and Troost downtown, and it went everywhere downtown. And the streetcars were everywhere. I mean, that's the one thing I wish they'd have kept. It cost them so much to take up those tracks and take up all those electrical wires and do all that and junk those streetcars, when those streetcars would be welcome today. I mean, just think of the travel that people could do. Streetcars went all the way out to Waldo. I mean, it was there was a streetcar that ran along Gregory Boulevard that went all the way out to Waldo, and it was a marvelous transportation system. I miss that. Not that I would use it that much, because I drive, and in high school I learned to love cars and fall in love with them. But I recall she used to let me wear my cowboy hat with the stitching around the edge and the stampede string, and my 2 6 guns. She'd allow me to wear that downtown Kansas City. And
there's a little cowboy walking around.
Yeah, I was only in my 20s, but no, actually I was about 7,
You don't have to laugh it out.
And I remember doing that, and she wouldn't, skip a beat. It was just, that's the way he wants to be. So I would be on the streetcar with my guns and my hat and my cowboy boots, and I just love it. Yeah. To go down there.
That's yeah. We are nearing the end of our time today.
We are.
We are. Yes, we are nearing the end of our time today. Let's do this. I'm going to give you the floor here to tell people maybe where they can find information about you, or where they can look you up. Like I said, we'll have links to all of your website from our website. But is there any words of wisdom you'd like to share to the listeners of the Kansas City podcast, or
words of wisdom?
Sure, yeah.
This is where I go.
That could be a word of wisdom. I'm fine with that.
That's about it. There's wisesculpture.com, and that has that's a website that has some of the writing and all the other stuff on it too. So and on Amazon, I'd like to throw this in. Yeah. Amazon, Horses See Ghosts, Ruined Days, Scattered Cranes, Resume Speed, which is what I call where I live out here, Resume Speed, Kansas. But those books are all on Amazon, and I do supply them with Night Train Cold Beer, which is the first book of short stories I wrote, but it's a very one-sided deal, and I don't want anybody to buy it. I keep it up there for promotional purposes, because it costs me $7.50 a copy, and Amazon pays me $6.75 a copy. Plus, I have to ship it to them, and they find me when the shipping is slow. So
Thanks, Amazon.
So I shipped the last one that I sent to them, media mail, and it cost me $3 or something, and they're fining me $3.50 because it got there a day late. And Amazon, boy, I'd hate to be on that side, to be a seller, on there. But I do keep it up there, and people do order it, and I have to keep sending them out at a loss. But I keep it on Amazon. Anyway, I have 5 books on Amazon. And
you're not getting a loss on all of them, right?
I'm not getting a loss, but my last royalty check was, I think, $12 and something from the publisher. And I don't know, maybe this will help. But they get good reviews. I mean, they've all got good reviews, and people seem to like them. They don't say, that's interesting. They like the books, but not enough people know about them. Maybe.
Well, just wait.
Maybe this
is going to push it over the edge.
This will catapult me into.
You're going to have a lot of people like writing reviews now saying, that's interesting.
That's interesting.
Heard you on the Kansas City podcast. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. But fame and fortune awaits.
Well, don't hold your breath.
Yeah, I haven't been. All these years, I haven't been holding my breath. But I have been. My name is on the Kansas Poets list now, which I'm very proud of, because it's not every Kansan that gets on there, but there's an asterisk next to it, and it's not because I take steroids or because I bet on other poets, but it's because I'm the new guy. Okay. And so I'll have that asterisk on there until they get another new guy. But I'm very proud to be on that, and that's about all I can think of is words of wisdom. So,
well, I think your word of wisdom is just, that's interesting. Remember, folks, you can find me on Twitter at Cole Lindberg, our Facebook page, Instagram, and Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Kansas City Pod. On our website, thekansascitypodcast.com, we will have a link to all of Guinotte's stuff with links to the books, links to the sculptures. I would definitely recommend that you take a look, because they're very. It's hard to describe. They're very interesting, and it's hard to describe over radio. I can't. I'm not the best describe it. I could be like, it's made of metal, and it's a lot of different parts put together. It's very interesting.
Well, that's about as good a description as you can get.
But this goes back to our Antique Roadshow conversation, because what I want to be able to say is, the snout of the horse is made from a 1967 Chevrolet hood ornament that was originally designed, and then I feel like I can't. It's like when people describe food, I'm just like, well, it's pizza and it's got cheese on it, and then they go and they're like, it's a special thin wheat crust baked over 7 days. There's the owl. Did it come back?
No, but you can see him up. Oh no, that's a hawk. That's worse than an owl. But it's up there. If you look at the corner of the house, that corner to the left of that corner, you'll see an eagle-like thing.
Oh, there I see it.
There he is. There he is.
It just flew up into the tree.
Yeah.
It just flew up.
Yeah.
This is wonderful.
That's a big hawk.
That's a huge hawk.
And I'm wondering if the hawk has taken over the owl's nest.
I wonder if they're friends.
Maybe. I doubt it. But anyway, it's a little of the wildlife out here that you catch a glimpse of now and then. And I have peacocks that come around. I feed them Alpo dog food and chicken scratch, and they love it. And the pups just raise hell when I do that because they want that Alpo.
Feed the peacocks dog food?
Yeah, they like it.
Yeah?
I used to fix them sort of a smorgasbord of cut up grapes and blueberries and stale bread cut up in little pieces and greens, celery and chopped up. And I used to have a real smorgasbord for them in the afternoon, and two of them would come, and they'd eat this all up. I noticed that they won't eat carrots, and they won't eat celery, but they eat everything else. They liked it. Strawberries, they love the berries, but I'm seeing if that hawk is doing something odd. No. Can't see him now, but the owls had fledglings.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't heard them around here lately, but I used to see them quite often. Anyway, the peacocks come and holler outside here until I come out and put some food on the ground. They don't like me to get too close to them.
Yeah.
But they holler and they sound like they sound like cats through a PA system or something, and I'll go out there and feed them. It used to be 6 or 8 peahens would come with them. And I'm not sure why they haven't been coming, but the peacocks are there every day, and.
That's very interesting.
I know that's. I know that'll. People are turning you off right now. People say, "Well, that's the last one of those I want to hear." I mean, I guess somebody will like it, but.
I'm gonna get some messages like, "Tell us more about the peacocks."
Yeah. Let's have a whole session on that.
Guinotte, thank you so much for being on the Kansas City podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, we will see everyone next time. Have a great Memorial Day, and we're getting into June. We're getting into summer, so enjoy it, and we will see you next week here on the Kansas City podcast.